Hello and welcome to a new episode of ZomCast 28. I'm Mehdi and I'm host of this podcast, and today we will be talking about logging in Python. So, logging is a very broad topic in Python and it has a lot of different complexities. But we can make a simple use of that by taking the steps that I'm going to talk about. So I switch over to Visual Studio Code to show that in action. First of all, I create a file and I name it logging lesson.py. And the first thing we need to do to make use of the logging capabilities of Python is to import the logging module. So I import it, and after that, the simplest use of logging could be calling logging.log. And as you can see, it receives a level and receives a message. So the level, for level, I pass in logging.info, for example, and the message, this is a message. And I run it. See the output. Nothing is displayed. The reason why nothing is displayed is that the default logging system of Python doesn't send info logs to the standard output. It sends probably to another destination. But for error, it sends it to the standard error or standard output. So if I change this to error, I can display it. This is a message and it's error. The level is displayed in the beginning of the log message. Again, I emphasize that logging is a broad topic in Python, but in order to have a simple logging in your system, in your Python scripts, you can use the steps that I am laying out in this lesson. In addition to calling logging dot some method with its default settings, you can also set some settings for the logging system by calling logging.basicconfig. And here we specify a file name to send the log message to, for example, log.txt, and some other parameters: file name, file mode, format for date format, and handlers. We also can specify some handlers to for example, send the log messages to specific locations, to some specific path. But we are already specifying the file name, so we don't add any handlers. And now the error should go into log.txt. I run the script. Let's check out the log.txt file. There we go. The log message went there. Also, the recommended way. So look at this: logging.basicconfig, setting logging configuration, and here's the recommended way of using the logging module. Recommended way of logging is to create a logging object from the logging module. You can call it whatever you like. I name it logger, and then to access it, you can call logging.getLogger. This gives you the default logger for the current module. Return a logger with the specified name, creating it if necessary. If no name is specified, return the root logger. So we can have loggers with different names. So I have a general logger here, and I pass in the name of the current module. Python documentation recommends passing the name of the current module when you are getting access to logger by calling get logger. And I have even seen this in use in some Python libraries. And now when we want to log something, we can simply call logger.log, and we specify the level, logging.error, for example. This is a message. Let's run it. It doesn't display anything. Again, the message goes to the log.txt file because we have already set the configuration for our logging system by calling basic config. As you can see, this is a message, and the log message for the main module also went into log.txt. Okay. Now, what if you want to have different loggers? So the logger that we created here is a general logger that sends everything that we have to that file actually. So we could call this whatever log.txt, and every log message that we have will be directed into that file, will be injected in that file. Even if we had a warning message, for example, logging.warn, and this is a warning, or if we had a debug message, logging.debug, I don't know why autocomplete doesn't work very well in this version of Visual Studio Code. I suspect it has some bugs. This is a debug message. Okay, let's run it. Again, nothing displayed in the standard output, but we can expect that we have these messages injected inside log.txt. There we go. We have error went there, and we have warning when displayed in this file. This is a message, this is a warning, but the debug message goes apparently to somewhere else. Logging.debug. For some reason, it is not injected to log.txt. It's a little bit weird, and most probably it is due to some presets defined in the logging module for the debug level of logging. So the debug messages don't go to the file that we specified using basic config. Only error and warning are injected in that file so far. But what if we want to have custom loggers, but we don't want to also spend a lot of time creating a custom logger that has, for example, methods for sending log messages to a warning file, or to debug file, or to info file, or to error file. How can we do that? Actually, because we have the option of using get logger, we can specify a custom name here. So for example, if I want to create an error logger called elogger, I can say logging get logger, and this time, in addition to the name of the module, I also specify another component like error dot error, and I do the same for other types of logging as well, other types of loggers like info loggers with ilogger, logging get logger f, I can say simply name plus dot info, and I can do the same for warning and debug as well. So I do it for wlogger or warning logger, logging dot get logger name plus dot warn. Three types of loggers. But in order to have different file destinations for any of them, for example, for error, we want to have an error.log. For info logger, we want to have a file called infolog.txt. For wlogger, we want to have a log file called, for example, warning.log, and things like that. And here's where the concept of handler comes in. We need to specify a handler. For elogger, for example, I add a handler and I specify a file handler. File handler, and file handler needs to be imported from logging module. And we specify a name for it. So for error, errors.log, and we do that same thing for the info log messages as well. So ilogger, let's add a space between these lines, between different types of loggers. Add handler, logging dot handler, file handler, and let's call this information.log. And for wlogger, we do this similar thing, add handler, logging dot file handler, and warning.log. Now that we have handlers for them, we also need to specify levels, because we need to send messages that have a severity or level of error to errors.log. So make sure you don't forget that. elogger.set level, the level is error. And for ilogger, level is logging.info. And for wlogger, the level is warning or warn. I suppose it's warning. And here in init.py for the for the Python code, you can see different levels of logs that are available, starting from critical and ending to not set. And each one of them, you can see that are equivalent to a number. Critical is equal to 50, fatal is equal to critical, which means fatal and critical are the same. And we have error, warning, warn and warning are the same. Okay, back to our code. Now we want to test our handlers and see if they really work. So testing our custom handlers or loggers, testing our loggers. We had an error logger, elog, or simply error. This is an error sent to custom logger. And we had info logger, info. This is an info log sent to custom logger. I pressed shift and enter by mistake, and wlogger dot warn. This is a warning sent to custom logger. Let's run the code and see if in fact our loggers work, and if we have these messages sent to corresponding log files. We had a syntax error. iLogger is not defined. Actually, we need to run it again. Sometimes running our script using this button has some issues, so I close it and I exit this actually, and I run it manually. I don't know why it fails sometimes. Maybe it has some definitions from our previous failed run and it resumes it and causing it to fail. Python logging listen warn method is deprecated. Use warning instead. Okay, we can use that. But before running our script again, actually let's check our files. We had 3 files: error, errors, information, and warning. Errors, great. This is an error message, error sent to custom logger. We had information, information should be great. This works too. And we had warning. Great, this is warning. So you can have actually a simple logging system that sends every type of message to a different and specific destination. You can see that it's flexible, although we didn't delve much into the logging system, but I think it should be enough for simple needs in your application where you want to have a logging system in your file. It helps sometimes very much when you have an error logger, for example, when your code crashes on the server for some reason. You can go and look up your log files, you can check your log files, and for better logging actually you can also specify the date when that error happened. So in your log messages, you can also specify the date and the time, the exact time when a problem occurred, in order to have a better clue and be better able to debug the issues. I hope that this lesson about Python logging was useful for you. So I wrap up the tutorial section of the podcast, and now let's switch over to our podcast and check out some news, some technology news. Over the last week, we had a failed launch, actually a failed landing of SpaceX Starship rocket prototype. So it started apparently going up and launching successfully. Sorry about my chair noise. It's a good chair, but I don't know why it's started to giving cranky noises. Yeah, it started launching successfully, the SpaceX Starship rocket prototype, and then when it was landing, it just burst into fire and just the mission failed. And also, one other news that you might find surprising is that Google is supposed apparently to ditch its browser, the Chrome browser. It's unbelievable, but I saw that on ZDNet news. So you can check it out on ZDNet under the title Google Chrome. It's time to ditch the browser. And Google Chrome, if you don't know, it's one of the most popular browsers in the world, and the reason why Google is ditching it is something that needs to be discussed, and it's a little bit weird. And the article of the week, if you are willing to call it an article, actually it is a question with a lot of interesting answers on super user. And it's about privacy and cookies that nowadays is very prevalent, and you see that almost on every website you visit, the website is asking you to give the permission to use cookies when you visit the website, and it almost forces you to accept it. So most of the cases it shows you a prompt that looks like if you don't accept the prompt, if you don't agree to their cookie policy, you are not allowed to visit the website and browse the website. And it's unfortunate. I don't like it at all. The title of the question I talked about is called What do cookie warnings mean by legitimate interest? So most of the cookies nowadays might claim that they have a legitimate interest in using your cookies or using cookies on your system, on your computer. But what they actually do is that they use your information, and they often do that in a forced way, so that you see yourself with little option in terms of opting out or not accepting it in the first place. Alright, so check out the question and the full answers on superuser.com. It should be interesting. And that's it for ZomCast 28 this week. I hope that you liked this podcast and this video. Please hit the like button if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel. And take care. See you in the next episode. Bye.